This is the American family that secretly controls Iran, not through armies, not through elections, but through something far more powerful: money. Because when a single bloodline holds influence deep inside global banking and energy markets, control doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be connected. To understand how that level of power is even possible, we first need to look at the richest families in America. And it starts with a dynasty that built its fortune on healthcare. 10. The Johnson family. The Johnson family built one of the most powerful healthcare empires in American history. It started in 1886, when three brothers, Robert, James, and Edward Johnson, introduced sterile surgical supplies to a world where infection after surgery was almost expected. Clean bandages, safe procedures, reliability. That simple shift in trust became the foundation of Johnson & Johnson, a company that would eventually sit inside nearly every American home. What began as a small medical supply business quietly evolved into a healthcare giant. But healthcare is not a forgiving industry. Every product carries responsibility. Every drug carries risk. As Johnson & Johnson expanded into pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and consumer goods, the pressure intensified. Lawsuits surfaced. Regulations tightened. Public scrutiny grew sharper. Entire product lines were questioned. Headlines challenged the company's reputation. And in healthcare, once trust cracks, it can collapse fast. There were moments when the family's legacy appeared vulnerable, moments when billions were on the line. But retreat was never an option. Instead of shrinking, the empire grew. They expanded globally. They invested in research. They diversified into life-saving drugs, surgical robotics, and vaccine development. While critics focused on controversy, the business kept compounding. Quietly, consistently, relentlessly. Today, Johnson & Johnson stands as one of the largest healthcare corporations in the world, valued in the hundreds of billions. The Johnson family's wealth isn't built on trends or hype. It's anchored to something permanent: the fact that healthcare is not optional. People will always need medicine. They will always need surgery. They will always need treatment. That inevitability turned a 19th century bandage business into generational billions. But healthcare, as massive as it is, isn't the most profitable industry on this list. Because the next family built their empire on desire, not necessity. 9. The Lauder family. The Lauder family built their empire on something far more subtle than medicine: beauty. It began with one woman, Estee Lauder, mixing skin creams in her kitchen in the 1940s. No corporate backing, no massive factory. Just a belief that luxury skincare could be sold directly to women who wanted to feel elegant, powerful, and seen. She didn't just sell products, she sold aspiration. From department store counters in New York to global luxury boutiques, Estee Lauder turned a handful of creams into a prestige cosmetics empire. Over time, the company expanded into perfumes, makeup, and high-end skincare lines. Brands were acquired. Global distribution networks were built. The name Lauder became synonymous with luxury. What started as a single product line became the Estee Lauder Companies, a global beauty powerhouse. But beauty is a ruthless industry. Trends change overnight. Consumer loyalty fades. Younger brands rise fast and fall even faster. For decades, new competitors tried to dethrone legacy beauty houses. Drugstore brands went premium. Luxury brands went digital. Social media reshaped marketing completely, and the Lauder empire faced a critical question. Could an old guard beauty dynasty survive in a world of influencers and viral brands? For a moment, it seemed like heritage alone might not be enough. Younger consumers weren't loyal to legacy names. They chased what was trending. But the Lauder family adapted. They didn't cling to the past. They acquired the future. They strategically purchased emerging brands. They embraced global markets. They expanded aggressively into Asia. They invested heavily in prestige positioning rather than mass market competition. And instead of fighting the new era, they absorbed it. Today, the Estée Lauder companies control dozens of high-end beauty brands sold in over 150 countries. The family's fortune is tied to a global appetite for luxury, something that doesn't disappear in recessions. When economies slow down, consumers may delay a car purchase, but they still buy lipstick. They still buy skincare. And that psychological resilience turned vanity into billions. But while beauty sells confidence, the next family built wealth on something far more powerful. They built it on information. 8. The Hearst family. The Hearst family built their empire on information and the power to shape it. It began in the late 1800s with William Randolph Hearst, a man who understood something most businessmen didn't: control the headlines, and you influence the nation. What started as a single newspaper quickly multiplied. City after city, state after state. Soon the Hearst name dominated American print media. But newspapers were only the beginning. Magazines followed, then radio, then television. Over time, the Hearst Corporation expanded into publishing, broadcasting, and real estate. The family didn't just report the news. They built one of the largest privately held media conglomerates in America. And when your business is information, your influence extends far beyond your balance sheet, but media is never stable. Public trust fluctuates. Political pressure builds. Technology disrupts everything. The rise of the internet devastated newspapers across America. Entire publications shut down. Advertising revenue collapsed. Legacy media empires crumbled under digital pressure. And for a moment, it seemed like even the Hearst dynasty might struggle to survive in a world that no longer relied on print. Then came the shift. Instead of resisting digital transformation, Hearst adapted. They diversified into cable networks, digital publishing platforms, and data-driven media assets. They expanded internationally. They invested in streaming partnerships. While competitors were shrinking, the Hearst portfolio was repositioning itself. The family didn't cling to ink and paper. They pivoted to pixels and platforms. Today, the Hearst Corporation owns major television networks, dozens of magazines, significant stakes in sports media, and vast real estate holdings. It remains one of the largest privately held media companies in the United States. The Hearst family's wealth isn't just tied to revenue, it's tied to narrative. And narrative shapes perception. Perception shapes markets. Markets shape fortunes. That's power layered on top of money. But even media influence can't compare to what happens when a family owns the very buildings people travel to, sleep in, and gather inside. Because the next dynasty built its wealth on hospitality and turned a single hotel into a global luxury empire. 7. The Hilton family. The Hilton family built their empire on a simple idea: own the place where the world sleeps. It began in 1919 when Conrad Hilton purchased his first hotel in Texas. He wasn't trying to build a dynasty. He was trying to build consistency. Clean rooms, reliable service, a place travelers could trust. But Conrad Hilton thought bigger than a single property. He envisioned a network of hotels stretching across cities, then states, then continents. As air travel expanded and global business accelerated, Hilton properties appeared everywhere: airports, downtown skylines, resort beaches. The Hilton name became a symbol of luxury, scale, and stability. What started as one hotel quietly evolved into one of the most recognizable hospitality brands in the world. But hospitality is cyclical. Wars disrupt travel. Recessions cut vacations. Global crises can empty hotels overnight. The industry lives and dies by movement, and when the world stops moving, revenue disappears. The Hilton empire faced economic downturns, ownership changes, corporate restructurings. At times, the brand risked dilution. Competition intensified. New hotel chains entered the market aggressively. Boutique hotels began capturing younger travelers. And then came something even more disruptive: global travel shutdowns. Entire hotel floors went dark. But this was not the end of the Hilton fortune. because the family's wealth wasn't just tied to nightly bookings. It was tied to ownership structures, real estate assets, and brand equity built over decades. Even when the company changed hands publicly, the Hilton legacy retained its generational stake in one of the most valuable hospitality brands on earth. Today, Hilton operates thousands of properties across more than 100 countries. The brand commands premium rates, corporate contracts, and loyalty from millions of travelers. The Hilton family turned movement into billions. They built wealth on the simple fact that business never truly stops, and people will always travel. But hotels, as powerful as they are, still depend on consumer spending. The next family built an empire on something far more permanent: ownership of the assets themselves. 6. The Pritzker family. The Pritzker family didn't just build hotels, they built control. It started in the 1950s, when Jay Pritzker saw opportunity where others saw risk. He invested in a struggling motel near Los Angeles International Airport. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't iconic, but it was strategic. That single move became the foundation of Hyatt Hotels. From there, the family expanded aggressively. Luxury resorts, urban high-rises, international properties. The Hyatt name grew into one of the most respected hospitality brands in the world. But hotels were never the full story. Behind the scenes, the Pritzker family quietly diversified into private equity, manufacturing, financial services, and venture capital. They didn't just collect revenue, they collected ownership stakes across industries. They weren't building a brand, they were building a financial web. But internal power can be more dangerous than external competition. As the Pritzker fortune grew, so did the number of heirs. And with more heirs came more tension. Disputes over trust structures, disagreements over control. Legal battles that exposed just how vast and complicated the family's financial architecture had become. For a moment, it looked like the empire might fracture from within. Billions were tied up in trusts designed to shield wealth from taxes and outside interference. But those same structures became battlegrounds between family members. The Pritzkers faced a choice: collapse under internal pressure or restructure and survive. They chose survival. The family reorganized its holdings, divided assets, and maintained control over key investments. Hyatt remained strong. Their private equity footprint expanded. Their financial diversification insulated them from the volatility that destroys single industry fortunes. They didn't just preserve wealth, they engineered it. Today, the Pritzker family remains one of the wealthiest dynasties in America, with holdings that stretch far beyond hotels. Their fortune is layered: real estate, private equity, venture investments, political influence. They mastered one powerful principle: ownership multiplies. But even diversified empires can't compare to what happens when a family owns something consumed daily, globally, and obsessively. Because the next dynasty built its fortune on something found in almost every pantry in America, and nearly every pet bowl too. 5. The Mars family. The Mars family built their empire on something deceptively simple: candy. It started in 1911, when Frank Mars began selling buttercream candies from his kitchen in Tacoma, Washington. He wasn't building a multinational corporation, he was trying to make ends meet. But his son, Forrest Mars, thought bigger. He expanded operations. He perfected mass production. He introduced brands that would become household names: Snickers, Milky Way, M&Ms. Products that weren't seasonal luxuries but daily indulgences. Candy wasn't just a treat, it was habit. Over time, Mars Incorporated grew beyond chocolate. The family moved into pet food, acquiring brands that dominate grocery shelves worldwide. They expanded into food products, animal care services, and global supply chains. But they did something even more strategic. They kept it private. No public shareholders. No quarterly earnings calls, no outside interference, just family control. But scale creates pressure. Global supply chains are fragile. Commodity prices fluctuate. Sugar, cocoa, and raw materials spike unexpectedly. Economic downturns hit discretionary spending first. Candy may be comforting, but it's not essential. And as health consciousness grew, sugar became the enemy. Consumer preferences shifted toward organic, low-sugar, plant-based alternatives. Entire industries rebranded around wellness. For a moment, it seemed like the candy empire might face long-term decline. Then, the Mars family did what dynasties do. They diversified deeper into pet care, an industry that thrives even during recessions. People may cut personal luxuries, but they rarely cut spending on their pets. And suddenly, Mars wasn't just a candy company. It was a global consumer goods powerhouse. Today, Mars Incorporated generates tens of billions in annual revenue. It remains one of the largest privately held companies in the United States. The family's net worth ranks among the highest in America. Quietly, consistently, without public drama. They turned small indulgences into generational wealth. They mastered repetition, everyday purchases, everyday cravings, everyday habits. And that steady, global consumption built one of the most durable fortunes in America. But even a private candy empire can't compete with what happens when a family controls the energy that powers entire economies. Because the next dynasty didn't sell sweets. They sold fuel. 4. The Koch family. The Koch family built their empire on something far more powerful than products. They built it on energy. It began with Fred Koch in the 1940s, developing advanced oil refining processes at a time when America's energy demand was exploding. What started as an engineering innovation quietly transformed into Koch Industries, a private conglomerate that would stretch into oil refining, pipelines, chemicals, manufacturing, agriculture, and commodities trading. But here's what made the Koch empire different. They didn't chase headlines. They built infrastructure. Pipelines that moved fuel across states, refineries that powered cities, chemical plants that supplied manufacturers, industries most Americans never see, but rely on every single day. Over time, Charles and David Koch expanded the business aggressively, reinvesting profits into new verticals and acquisitions. While other families focused on consumer brands, the Kochs focused on industrial dominance. And industrial dominance compounds fast. But energy is volatile. Oil prices crash. Regulations tighten. Environmental scrutiny intensifies. Public perception turns hostile. Entire administrations shift policy overnight. For energy giants, one political change can cost billions. The Koch empire faced criticism. It faced regulatory battles. It faced economic downturns that sent oil prices into freefall. And when oil drops, profits evaporate. For many companies, those moments would have been catastrophic. But Koch Industries wasn't just oil. It was diversified across dozens of sectors: chemicals, fertilizer, trading desks, fiber, asphalt, consumer paper products. If one division slowed, another accelerated. And while the public focused on headlines, the private machine kept generating cash. Today, Koch Industries is one of the largest privately held companies in America, generating well over $100 billion in annual revenue. The family's combined wealth ranks among the highest in the country. They built a fortune not on trends, but on infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't go out of style. It powers factories. It fuels transportation. It underpins supply chains. The Koch family turned industrial backbone into generational billions. But even energy empires can be overshadowed. Because the next family didn't just power the economy, they once controlled it. 3. The Rockefeller family. The Rockefeller family built the original American fortune. Before tech billionaires, before retail giants, before hedge fund titans, there was oil. In the late 1800s, John D. Rockefeller saw what others missed. Oil wasn't just a product. It was the future. Through relentless strategy, calculated acquisitions, and ruthless efficiency, He built Standard Oil into a machine that controlled nearly 90% of America's oil refining capacity at its peak. 90%. That wasn't influence, that was dominance. Railroads bent to his pricing power. Competitors disappeared. Entire markets moved at his pace. Rockefeller didn't just participate in the oil industry, he structured it. And as kerosene lit American homes and gasoline fueled a new industrial age, the Rockefeller fortune exploded. But when one company becomes too powerful, the government notices. Public outrage grew. Journalists exposed monopolistic tactics. Political pressure intensified. And in 1911, the United States Supreme Court ordered the breakup of Standard Oil. To most empires, that would have been devastating. To Rockefeller, it was multiplication. Standard Oil fractured into dozens of companies, many of which later became Exxon, Chevron, and other energy giants. And the family retained stakes in them all. What was meant to weaken the empire diversified it. And as oil demand surged through the 20th century, through wars, industrial expansion, and the automobile revolution, Rockefeller wealth continued compounding. Then came the next evolution: banking, real estate, philanthropic foundations, strategic investments. The family moved from pure industrial dominance into financial architecture. They weren't just rich anymore. They were institutional. Today, the Rockefeller fortune has been dispersed across trusts, foundations, and investment vehicles. But its legacy still echoes through finance, energy, and philanthropy. They turned a monopoly into a multi-generational financial system. They built a dynasty so powerful that even its forced breakup made it stronger. For decades, the Rockefellers represented the pinnacle of American wealth. But even that historic dominance would eventually be eclipsed. Because the next family didn't just sell oil. They built the largest retail machine the world has ever seen. 2. The Walton family. The Walton family built the largest retail empire in human history. It began in 1962, when Sam Walton opened a discount store in Rogers, Arkansas. His idea was simple: sell products cheaper than anyone else, and make up the difference in volume. Small town, low prices, relentless expansion. What started as a regional chain quickly became something much bigger. Walmart didn't just open stores. It optimized logistics. It built distribution networks so efficient that competitors couldn't keep up. It negotiated pricing power so aggressively that suppliers depended on its shelves. Walmart wasn't just a store. It became the backbone of American consumer retail. And as the company scaled across all 50 states, then across continents, the Walton family's ownership stake multiplied into staggering wealth. But dominance invites pressure. Criticism grew. Labor disputes surfaced. Competitors fought back. E-commerce reshaped shopping behavior. Then came Amazon, a new kind of retail threat that didn't rely on storefronts at all. For the first time, Walmart's supremacy looked vulnerable. Online shopping accelerated. Physical stores became liabilities. Entire malls across America collapsed. And for a moment, it seemed like even the largest retailer in the world could be disrupted. But Walmart adapted. They invested billions into digital infrastructure. They expanded their online presence. They leveraged their physical stores as fulfillment hubs. While others scrambled, Walmart used scale as a weapon. And scale is hard to defeat. Today, Walmart generates over $500 billion in annual revenue. The Walton family retains a massive ownership stake, making them collectively one of the wealthiest families in the United States, often topping public wealth rankings. They turned low margins into high dominance. They turned everyday purchases into generational billions. Groceries, clothing, electronics, essentials. When millions of Americans swipe their cards each day, a fraction flows back to one family. For decades, the Waltons have stood at the top of America's wealth pyramid. But even retail supremacy has limits. Because the family at number one didn't build stores. They built banking power that transcends borders. 1. The Rothschild family. At number 1, the name that has hovered over global finance for more than 2 centuries. The Rothschild family. Long before modern central banks, long before oil became geopolitical leverage, the Rothschilds were financing governments across Europe. Their banking houses moved capital across borders faster than most nations could communicate. They didn't just participate in finance, they helped modernize it, and over time, their name became synonymous with global banking power, often mentioned whenever international debt, sovereign bonds, or energy financing entered the conversation. But this is where things get interesting, because when you follow the money in global politics, it almost always runs through banking systems. Iran is one of the most sanctioned nations in modern history. Sanctions don't just restrict trade, they restrict access to global banking networks. And global banking networks determine which countries can move money freely, and which ones can't. When sanctions tighten, when oil exports are restricted, when financial access is cut off, decisions aren't made by retailers or oil drillers. They're made within the architecture of global finance. And this is where the Rothschild name often enters public speculation. Not because they directly run Iran, but because global capital markets, the same markets their legacy helped shape, influence how nations survive economically under pressure. Oil pricing, sovereign debt, currency access, international lending. These mechanisms affect countries like Iran far more than speeches or headlines. But here's the key distinction. There is no verified evidence that the Rothschild family secretly controls Iran's government. What exists instead is something more nuanced and arguably more powerful. Financial infrastructure. When a family dynasty builds wealth inside the arteries of global banking, their influence touches markets that affect entire nations, including those under sanction. And when energy, banking, and geopolitics intersect, perception turns into myth. So when people say the American family that secretly controls Iran, they're not pointing to a hidden throne room. They're pointing to something less visible, but structurally significant. Global financial systems influence oil markets. Oil markets influence Iran's economy. And families whose legacy helped build and navigate those financial systems inevitably become part of that conversation. The Rothschild fortune isn't about direct control. It's about systemic influence. They didn't build retail chains. They didn't build candy brands. They built access to capital. And in the modern world, capital moves countries.